A poor black janitor, long dismissed for her worn-out shoes and quiet gaze, left an entire room of senior engineers speechless when she solved in under a minute the problem that had stumped 20 specialists for over 6 months. But just as she earned her very first moment of respect, the CEO walked in. And what happened next changed everything. The gleam of a rearview mirror light cast reflections across the white marble floors of the 40th floor lobby, just beneath a massive portrait of Charles Henley, founder of Henley Tech, the multi-billion-dollar medical technology empire. Right below that towering image, a black man in a worn maintenance uniform crouched down quietly, collecting scraps of paper no one cared to notice. His back was slightly hunched, hands calloused, and the bristles of his floor scrubber were so frayed they fanned out like a hedgehog's quills. His name was Ezekiel Rowe, 58. He once worked as a senior mechanic at an electric engine factory until the plant shut down. Since then, he'd been mopping floors to support his wife with heart disease, and a daughter who had to pause high school midway. No one in the tower ever noticed him. No one said hello. People passed him like wallpaper. Even when he swept close to a group in suits huddled outside meeting room 7 with a sign that read, "Emergency Engineering, Confidential." Rowe didn't intend to stop, but then he heard a sentence. "We've spent 3 months, hired 20 specialists, and burned through nearly $500,000, and we still can't get the artificial heart model to run. We may need to outsource the entire project." Another voice slammed down on the table. "Absolutely not. Charles Henley signed off on that prototype personally before he died. If we drop it now, Henley Tech's credibility goes with it." Rowe froze. He didn't understand everything. But the words "artificial heart model" pulled memories flooding back to the old workbench where he used to assemble the navigation boards and cardiac assist devices. He took a breath. Then, he did something a janitor should never do. He knocked on the conference room door. 4 heads turned. All white shirts, tight ties. Their expressions half sneer, half confusion. A woman, likely the lead, snapped at him. "What do you want?" "The floor's not dirty here." Rowe swallowed hard. His voice shook, but his eyes stayed clear. "Sorry. I overheard something about the artificial heart's nav board. If I may, I believe I can help." Laughter burst out from a bald man by the digital board. "You're a janitor. We've got PhDs from MIT, engineers from Stanford, and you think you can help?" Rowe didn't argue. He simply removed his gloves, stepped forward to the schematic taped on the board, tilted his head, and studied it for exactly 7 seconds. Then he pointed to a small circuit near the electronic valve chip. "This section's misaligned for voltage. That chip will overload without a current divider here. It'll cause signal failure in the heart model after 3 minutes of runtime." The room fell silent. One engineer rushed to the simulation terminal. He pulled up the diagnostic. 45 seconds later, the system flashed red, exactly as Rowe predicted. "My God! He's right." And just then, Ella Henley walked in. Daughter of Charles Henley, current CEO of Henley Tech. Her heels echoed sharply, silver-gray dress, hair tied tight, eyes cold and commanding. She scanned the room and asked, "What's going on here?" The team lead stammered, "That's Ezekiel Rowe, the building janitor. He just found a flaw we've been missing for 3 months." Ella locked eyes with Rowe. She didn't blink. No praise, no smile, no sign of what she was thinking. Then she walked over, unmounted the prototype's circuit board, and placed it directly in front of him. "If you're so smart, fix it. Right here." The air turned heavy as iron. Rowe studied the board, then silently pulled a worn mini screwdriver from his shirt pocket and began loosening screws with trembling hands. In under a minute, he inserted a resistor and rerouted the wiring. The engineer reran the simulation. Green. No errors. All eyes shifted to Rowe. What was once condescension became silent awe. Ella still didn't smile. She only said one thing, "Come with me. Floor 47, now." And just like that, the man who mopped the floors stepped into a place no janitor in Henley Tech's history had ever entered, the executive strategy floor. The next morning, as crowds poured into the gleaming glass tower of Henley Biotech headquarters, Ezekiel Rowe was once again bent over scrubbing dried mud from the ground floor hallway. The same old mop, the same frayed shoes, the same stinging scent of disinfectant his world for 17 years. No one greeted him. No one knew his name. Except today. A security guard rushed up, holding out a radio still hissing with static. "You're Rowe, right? They're calling you to floor 47. Immediately." Ezekiel frowned. Floor 47 was the location of the company's most confidential research center, a place far beyond the clearance of a low-tier maintenance worker like him. There must be some mistake. Number Michael Gray, executive assistant, gave the order himself. For a second, the entire lobby froze. A few unfamiliar eyes turned toward the once invisible man. The black janitor with the mop now summoned to the highest floor. Ezekiel hesitated, then quietly pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, wiped the sweat from his brow, and stepped into the elevator like a man walking onto a stage he'd never dreamed he'd reach. Floor 47 opened in a wash of cold white light. The glass walls mirrored his reflection back at him like some surreal dream. Michael Gray stood waiting. His eyes were razor sharp. "Mr. Ezekiel Rowe, thank you for coming. Follow me." No explanation, no small talk. Ezekiel followed him down a long corridor and into a sealed lab. Inside, standing before a massive digital schematic screen, was Ella Henley, Henley Tech's powerful CEO. She gripped a stylus pen, her eyes sharp with calculation. On the screen, a detailed simulation of the company's biocircuit system, the core of Project PulseNet, their billion-dollar initiative now teetering on collapse. Ella didn't turn around, but her voice sliced through the silence. "You were the one who rewired the power line last night, weren't you?" Ezekiel swallowed. I noticed smoke near the sensor coil, and a capacitor was bulging. You fixed it. I just reconnected it based on the old tech spec. I think I saw a board like that once back when I worked in a small electronics shop. Ella turned to face him, her gaze sharp and focused. "Do you realize yesterday was the first time in 9 months PulseNet didn't crash at minute 18? Ezekiel hesitated. "I didn't know that, but I'm glad it ran." Michael stepped in. "We've brought in 22 specialists over the last 2 months. None of them caught that fault. You found it in under a minute." Ella crossed her arms. I want to know why Ezekiel took a deep breath. And for the first time in his life, he looked someone powerful in the eye and didn't look away. "Because I don't see it as just a machine. I see it as my daughter's heart." The room fell silent. Her name was Naomi. She passed away 11 years ago from congenital heart failure. That year, I spent everything I had buying old circuit boards trying to build a cardiac assist device. Not to save her, it was too late, but to understand why. His voice trembled, but his eyes were steady. "I taught myself to solder. I experimented on toy kits. I failed over and over, but I never stopped. Because I believed if I could understand it, I'd never have to watch another child slip away like Naomi did." Ella slowly set her stylus down on the table. Then she stepped toward him. "You don't have an engineering degree, no certificates, no college diploma, but you have something none of the other 47 people in this room possess a reason not to give up." She handed him a silver ID badge gleaming beneath the LED lights. "I want you to join the Special Emergency Engineering Unit. For now it's temporary, no pressure. I just want to see how far you can go." Ezekiel stared at the badge, barely believing it was real. "I'm just a janitor," Ella smiled faintly. "And I used to sell newspapers on the street. We all start somewhere. The question is, are you willing to take the next step?" The tension in the room softened. Michael opened the door. "We start the meeting at 2 p.m. You've got 2 hours to rest and decide." Ezekiel turned to leave, but stopped in the doorway. "May I ask one last thing?" "What is it?" "If one day I fail, will you fire me?" Ella didn't hesitate. "If one day you stop believing in what you're doing, I'll be the first to ask you to leave. But I don't believe that day will ever come." Ezekiel gave a small nod. He stepped out, and for the first time, his footsteps weren't quiet anymore. At exactly 2 p.m., Ezekiel Rowe walked into the conference room on floor 47. A brand new silver badge hung around his neck. Gone was the faded janitor's uniform, replaced by a crisp white lab coat, fresh creases still visible as if it had just been taken out of the box. His hands trembled slightly as he set down his old canvas backpack on a chair, but his eyes shone brighter than they ever had before. Inside the room, more than 20 engineers, coders, and senior researchers were already seated. They exchanged confused glances, wondering who this stranger was, a man not listed in any HR record now standing among them. Ella Henley entered. Hair tied high, face unreadable, she gave a small nod toward Ezekiel, then began the meeting with one simple sentence, introducing our new team member. Every eye turned to him. Ezekiel stood up. His throat was dry. My name is Ezekiel Rowe. I used to work in janitorial services, but when I was younger, I taught myself how to build and repair circuits, for personal reasons. He paused, then added, I don't have any formal education. I just wanted to understand the things nobody ever explained to me. A faint chuckle echoed from one corner, but it was immediately shut down by Ella's ice-cold glare. Mr. Rowe will be joining the tech team for 2 weeks. Temporarily. But everyone in this room will treat him as an equal. If anyone disagrees, you're free to leave right now. No one moved, but the silence between them was thick as the glass walls surrounding Ezekiel. The meeting began. On the massive screen, the PulseNet system diagram appeared, this time the latest version with markers highlighting high-risk zones. Michael Gray presented the remaining issues. Micro-latency occurs at the junctions between signal transmission circuits and the processing core, causing a 0.002-second delay that triggers an auto shutdown at the 18-minute mark. Another engineer, Kara, added, We've tried 3 voltage modulation solutions, but each one destabilized the signal decoder. So far, we don't have a clear path forward. Ezekiel studied the diagram closely. His brow furrowed. Then he slowly raised his hand. Excuse me, may I ask something? The entire room turned to him. Kara raised an eyebrow. Yes, why not try adding a simple manual sensor layer to the secondary circuit? Instead of forcing the signal through the core, create an independent listening point like a second ear. Kind of like when you hear your child's heartbeat getting weaker, you don't just use your ears, you feel it with your hands, with your instinct. The room froze. Michael frowned. That theory won't hold. An auxiliary sensor would introduce interference. Only if you place it on the wrong frequency, Ezekiel replied gently. But if it runs on a distinct band, something like fetal heart tones, it won't interfere. It'll echo a different rhythm. One that sustains the system when the main line is about to fail. This time Ella sat up straight. She turned to the research team. Simulate Mr. Rowe's suggestion. 3 engineers immediately typed the parameters into the simulator. 30 seconds later, the system output flashed onto the screen, and for the first time there was no shutdown at the 18-minute mark. The waveform pulsed steadily, like the strong, living heartbeat of a human being. The entire room held its breath. A single clap broke the silence from Ella. A father's insight, she said quietly. Sometimes it outclasses every textbook in the world. Her words sliced through the unspoken bias that had hung in the air. After a long pause, Kara lowered her head slightly. I'm sorry, Mr. Rowe. I misjudged you. Ezekiel simply smiled. He wasn't here for apologies, he was here to prove his worth. From that meeting onward, Ezekiel was no longer just the janitor. He joined strategic brainstorms, contributed to circuit model tests, and even redesigned the auxiliary sensor schematic for the entire PulseNet system. At first, the experts still had doubts, but little by little doubt turned into curiosity, and curiosity grew into respect. A week later, the main office sent an update. The new PulseNet prototype had passed all tests, 0 latency, 32% increase in system stability. A billionaire tech mogul in New York requested immediate deployment. The entire team celebrated, and for the first time, Ezekiel was invited to raise a glass with them. But the celebration didn't last long. The next morning, a black luxury car pulled up in front of headquarters. A man in a gray suit stepped out. Frederick Langston, the official CEO of the company. He walked in without greeting anyone. No smile, just a cold question. Who is Ezekiel Rowe? The room went still. Ella stood up. I'm the one who authorized him to join the project. Is there a problem? Frederick looked at her as if seeing through her. You let a janitor into the floor 47 strategy room. The words landed like a slap across the face of everyone present. Ezekiel said nothing. He calmly removed the silver badge from around his neck and placed it on the table, but this time he didn't bow his head. Ella clenched her fists. Kara glanced at Michael, then something no one expected happened. One by one, every engineer in the room stood up. Michael spoke. "If Ezekiel doesn't belong here, then maybe none of us do." Ella stepped forward, eyes locked on the CEO. "You can fire one man, but you can't fire an entire team." Langston was stunned. Ezekiel turned to leave, convinced this was the end. But just then, the tablet on the table lit up. A new message had arrived. From the billionaire in New York who came up with the auxiliary sensor idea. "I want to meet him. Privately, next week." Ella smiled and handed the tablet to the CEO. Frederick Langston looked up from the message. For the first time, a reluctant smile crept onto his face. "Seems I overlooked a diamond in the rough." Ezekiel had never needed validation, but now the whole world had seen him. A week after the showdown with CEO Frederick Langston, Ezekiel Rowe sat quietly by the window in business class, his gaze lost in the slow drift of clouds beneath the plane's wing. He had never left the state before, never imagined setting foot in New York, let alone being invited to meet one of the most powerful tech billionaires in America, Jonathan Ainsley. When the plane touched down at JFK, a uniformed driver was waiting at arrivals, holding a sign that read, "Mr. Ezekiel Rowe." A silver Rolls-Royce Phantom sat at the curb, silent as a tamed beast. Ezekiel didn't speak. He simply nodded and stepped into the car. The headquarters of Ainsley Technologies in the heart of Manhattan looked nothing like anything Ezekiel had ever imagined. An 82-story tower of glass, wrapped in curved solar panels, a blade of light reaching into the sky. He was greeted by a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes sharp enough to cut steel, Ms. Lynette Doyle Ainsley's longtime assistant. "He's waiting for you on the 77th floor. Don't worry, he's got a soft spot for honest minds." As the elevator doors closed behind him, Ezekiel gripped the strap of his old canvas backpack, as if it were the last piece of his old world he refused to let go. The meeting room on the 77th floor didn't look like a corporate office. It looked like a personal library, wood-paneled walls, old books, warm amber lighting. At the center of the room stood a man in his 60s, hair silver white, pouring tea into 2 porcelain cups. "Mr. Rowe," he said, "please sit." Ezekiel hesitated, then slowly pulled out a chair. Ainsley slid a cup toward him. "I heard you saved PulseNet, with an idea no one else even thought of." Ezekiel shifted awkwardly. "I just tried to think like someone who needed to survive. Who needed to be heard? That system felt like a dying child no one bothered to listen to." Ainsley was silent for a moment, then softly, "Do you know why I called you here?" Ezekiel shook his head. "I don't care that you used to mop floors. I care that you understood what an entire team of engineers missed: the heart, instinct, human emotion." He rose from his seat and walked to a massive technical map pinned to the wall, a blueprint of an entirely different system, NeuroCore. PulseNet was just the beginning. "I'm building something far greater, a neural signal processor that can translate emotion into data. It could help treat PTSD, anxiety, even repair damaged neural pathways." Jonathan turned, locking eyes with Ezekiel. "But I need an unorthodox mind. Someone not bound by formulas. I need you." Ezekiel could barely believe his ears. I only learned circuit boards from old manuals. I'm not qualified." Jonathan raised a hand. "I don't hire degrees. I hire instincts." 2 months later, Ezekiel officially moved to New York, becoming a special advisor on the NeuroCore project. He worked side by side with PhDs from MIT and Stanford, but this time, no one looked down on him. He had his own office, his own assistant, but kept his humble routine: early mornings, late nights. Lunch was always a homemade sandwich. He turned down interviews, avoided social media, and never boasted. But his name spread like wildfire. The press called him the janitor who fixed the future, the gatekeeper of destiny in a new age of technology. One late night, with only the flickering glow of monitors lighting the lab, Ezekiel sat alone with the latest prototype of NeuroCore. He put on the headset, attached a single electrode to his wrist, and pressed play. It was the heartbeat of his son Caleb, recorded years ago when he was still alive. That faint, faltering rhythm. Now it played back loud and clear through the system he had built. That heartbeat was why he had entered this world of machines, why he had walked through darkness with fire in his hands. Suddenly, the neurocore display flashed. An unusual wave sequence pulsed across the screen. Ezekiel's face shifted. He quickly input commands analyzing the signal and saw something no one in the team had noticed, a wave pattern matching activity in the visual memory region of the brain. He grabbed a pen and scribbled furiously, "If this system is accurate, we're not just hearing emotions, we might be seeing memories." He leapt to his feet and ran straight to the server room. A security guard stepped in his way. "Sorry, Mr. Rowe. System's locked down after hours." Ezekiel's eyes blazed. "It's okay. This is about my son." The next morning, Jonathan Ainsley was awakened by an emergency call from the lab. "Sir, Ezekiel rewired the entire neurocore map last night. It's not just emotion detection anymore. He's unlocked a gateway into visual memory, a completely new level." Jonathan didn't speak for a moment. He already knew this was why he had hired Ezekiel. But across the country, in the highest office of PulseNet headquarters in San Francisco, Frederick Langston was watching the headlines scroll across a dozen screens. His expression ice cold. "Get legal on the line," he ordered. "If Rowe built anything on PulseNet's original platform, I want that patent under our name." A new war had begun. One morning in October, before the sun had burned away the last of the mist over Rockefeller Plaza, Ezekiel Rowe walked into Jonathan Ainsley's office. In his hands, a thick binder, the completed blueprint for the new neurocore system. Jonathan read through every page in silence. Then he exhaled. "If we go public with this, we'll lead the world in brain communication technology, but it will also make us a target." He slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "Langston has filed legal action. They claim neurocore inherits core design elements from PulseNet. And because you were once their temp employee, they're demanding intellectual property rights." Ezekiel said nothing, but there was no fear in his eyes. 3 days later, the Manhattan Federal Courthouse was packed with media. The plaintiff, PulseNet Corporation, led by Frederick Langston, flanked by a legal army. The defendant, Ezekiel Rowe, represented by Ainsley Technologies' legal team. Before the trial began, a reporter squeezed forward. "Mr. Rowe, do you really think you can win against a billion-dollar company?" Ezekiel smiled faintly. "I didn't come here to win a lawsuit. I came to protect what I built with my heart." Inside, PulseNet's lawyers presented complex schematics, claiming neurocore shared microcircuitry with PulseNet's original framework. Langston's lead attorney stood before the court. "Mr. Rowe may not have an engineering degree, but he had access to confidential material during his time at PulseNet. By law, the intellectual property belongs to us." The courtroom buzzed with whispers, but Ezekiel only bowed his head, no protest, no outburst. Then his turn came. He rose slowly, carrying a worn cardboard box. Inside were yellowed, hand-drawn sketches. Pencil marks, rough and faded. "This was my first design." "I sketched it 17 years ago," Ezekiel said softly, holding up a crumpled, yellowed sheet of paper. "When my son was diagnosed with a neuro disorder, I tried to connect emotions to electrical signals. I didn't know the terminology, I didn't have software, but I had a reason." He pulled out a worn notebook, placing it gently on the stand. "Every page in here is a sleepless night. No PulseNet data, no high-tech systems, just the memories and belief of a father." The plaintiff's attorney prepared to object, but the judge raised a hand. "This court will review the evidence." Outside the courtroom, the battle raged, on this time across the internet. The hashtag Justice for Ezekiel spread like wildfire. Tech experts, social justice advocates, even engineers who had once worked alongside Ezekiel began speaking up in his defense. Then Ella Henley, an ex-PulseNet engineer, publicly released the company's internal logs, proving Ezekiel's concept of a secondary emotional sensor had no precedent in any prior blueprint. 1 week later, the court issued its final ruling. The court affirms neurocore is an original invention. Mr. Ezekiel Rowe is the rightful owner of all associated technology. No one clapped. But every eye turned toward Ezekiel, no longer a forgotten janitor with a dream, but a man who stood on that dream and built a future. The next day, in the grandest press conference in Ainsley Technologies history, Jonathan Ainsley took the stage. Ezekiel Rowe will be appointed Chief Science Officer of the NeuroCore project, not because of degrees, but because of his resolve, because of the humanity woven into every circuit he designed. As Ezekiel walked up under the blinding lights and a sea of camera lenses, he spoke slowly. I never wanted to be a symbol. I only wanted to prove real worth isn't in a suit or a diploma. It's in what you refuse to give up on, no matter who laughs in your face. At the back of the room, a woman sat silently, tears falling, his mother. A month later, NeuroCore entered its first clinical trial. In a quiet therapy room, a young autistic boy for the first time was able to express his emotions using the system Ezekiel had built. His mother clutched him tightly, crying and laughing at once. From behind the observation glass, Ezekiel watched in silence, his hand trembling. In that moment, he didn't see New York. He didn't see headlines or ceremonies. He saw Caleb, the son he couldn't save. But today, he had saved someone else's child. And maybe a part of himself, too. New York winter. Snow blanketed the courtyard in front of the new headquarters of Ainsley Neurotech, a state-of-the-art neuroscience center backed by 3 of the top investors in America. Engraved on the steel plaque in the front lobby, NeuroCore project, led by Chief Science Officer Ezekiel Rowe. It was Inauguration Day, but Ezekiel wasn't in the speeches. He didn't attend the interviews. He wasn't on the stage. He was elsewhere, a small, quiet room at the end of the 3rd-floor hallway. On his desk, an old radio he'd rewired from scratch, and a wooden box filled with all his original sketches from his years in the dark. There was a knock. A teenage boy peeked in 16 curly hair, oversized glasses. He clutched a rough prototype for an AI device in his hands. Mr. Ezekiel, I drew this circuit. Is it right? Ezekiel turned slid on his magnifier glasses and studied the hand-drawn board. He didn't correct it. He asked a single question. What are you building it for? The boy scratched his head, then murmured, My mom lost feeling in her hands after an accident. I want to build something that can help her feel again, even if it's just a little. Ezekiel smiled. Then it's never wrong. Keep that version. Don't let anyone tell you you're not smart enough. Because intelligence isn't what you have. It's what you become if you never give up. That evening, as the grand ceremony wrapped up downstairs, Jonathan Ainsley stepped quietly into Ezekiel's office. He was holding an envelope sealed with the U.S. government crest. From the White House, he said, they want to award you the National Medal of Science. Ezekiel unfolded the letter and read it slowly. Then without a word, he folded it back and set it aside. I don't need a medal. What I need is a budget to expand free research labs for teenagers in Harlem, the Bronx, and Queens. Kids like me, like Caleb. Jonathan was taken aback, but after a pause, he nodded. I'll make it happen. A week later, the first Ezekiel Rowe lab opened its doors in Harlem. Over 200 students signed up in just the first 3 days. They didn't come to mop floors, they came to build their future with their own hands. And Ezekiel, he still showed up every day. Same worn-out shirt, same old canvas backpack. No one asked him to wear a suit anymore, because now he had nothing left to prove. 3 years later, in a specialized therapy room at Boston General Hospital, a child with severe brain trauma smiled and reached out to touch his mother for the first time in 6 years. No reporters were there, no cameras, but the device on his wrist was a custom-built NeuroCore unit, personally modified by Ezekiel. In the internal project journal, beneath all the dry technical notes, Ezekiel had handwritten one quiet sentence. This is not a machine, this is a bridge between love and the lost. One spring afternoon, Ezekiel returned to the old PulseNet building. It had been sold years ago. Now it was a community library. He stepped inside. The floors were new, glossy, but he remembered every corner, every crack he'd once scrubbed, every dismissive glance thrown his way. He didn't feel anger, he didn't feel regret, because he had gone farther than anyone ever believed he could. Near the entrance on a large wall hung a life-size portrait, a middle-aged black man in a lab coat holding a circuit diagram, smiling gently. And beneath it, only one line. He didn't have a degree, he had a reason. Ezekiel stood there for a long moment, then he smiled softly and kept walking. Thank you for watching. Don't forget, like the video if you believe justice can come from the smallest voices. Subscribe so you never miss more powerful and true stories like this one. Comment if you've ever stood up for someone you love, even when no one else believed you.